Welcome to Sustainable Sessions, hosted by yours truly, Lucas and Lauren. Episode 18, featuring Relauren.
Okay, I'm Lauren. I grew up in LA in like a beach city of Los Angeles. My mom is first generation American. Her parents are from Argentina. And I say that because I went to Argentina pre-COVID this year in like February and March. And I'm learning how many sustainable practices there are in like probably a lot of South American countries, but a lot in Argentina as far as like where their food is coming from and like how all the food is ugly. Like here we are in America, be like, I choose ugly produce or I choose ugly, like I'm subscribing to imperfect produce where like everything done there is just like it looks like how it is grown, anyways. So she's first generation American. We were raised with a lot of like sustainable practices in the house. She's definitely environmentalist and is like my environmental mentor and like guardian angel, and like she's just amazing. She's Wonder Woman. My parents split up when I was pretty young, and she like raised the three of us. My dad's amazing, and they have like such a sustainable, beautiful relationship too, which is awesome. But anyways, my mom definitely raised us with like strong, sustainable practices in the home. Um, the story I tell people all the time is we used to have a compost bucket next to the sink, and it was literally like a stock pot, like a soup pot, and it was just a pot next to the sink. Because the one thing my mom always had, no matter where we lived, was a garden in some capacity, and now it's like pumping back there. It's like a full jungle in her backyard. But before, even if it was like a few fruit trees and some herbs or something, she was always, that's how she connects with the environment in her own unique way. But so she always had compost because we always had a garden. And so when I had girlfriends come over when I was like a teenager, I would like hide the compost bucket under the sink because I was so embarrassed. I didn't want people to see that we had like, old food scraps in a pot and like fruit flies sometimes. And now here I am making like TikToks and Instagram. I'm like, look at my mom's compost. Like, look at the garden. I'm like, wow, the things I was so embarrassed of are now the things that I'm like boasting from the rooftops. Anyways, so where I like kicked my climate activism or just like awareness, I guess, into high gear was honestly 4 years ago after our presidential election when Trump was elected. I think, as with a lot of Americans, we realized we had to start fighting for the things that we didn't know we cared about as much once they were being threatened to be at like major risk or like eliminated entirely. So for me, growing up at the beach and like being an ocean enthusiast and just like an avid beach goer, I'm learning how to surf this year, which is like taking my environmentalism to a whole new level. But for me, offshore drilling was like the hot topic that I was like, hell no. So some people, it might be like pipelines, these are all terrible things. But for me, the one where I was like, not here, because the ocean is like my sanctuary and my safe haven, the place where I feel most like spirit filled. And they were talking about doing or selling the permits to start offshore drilling all along the coast of California. I literally Googled how to stop offshore drilling in California, and the Surfrider Foundation showed up. But it's like an environmental NGO that focuses on ocean conservation, like the protection and enjoyment of our ocean and beaches. And through that NGO, I found amazing community and accountability, and started taking courses at UCLA in sustainability. And I think I was reminded, like, oh, I'm so not alone in this fight. Like, I'm not the only person who cares about the ocean in this unique way and wants to like stop this like evil administration from doing this type of damage, instead of like investing that type of money in renewable resources, renewable energy. So yeah, it's been like 4 years of like, which is crazy because I feel like I can't imagine doing anything else now. I'm like, oh yeah, this is what a life purpose feels like when you're like, this is all I think about and this is all I like care about. And every conversation I have with people like somehow circles back to climate change. And which is like a good and a bad thing, I guess, because I'm like a hot dinner table. I'm like a risky person to have at a dinner table sometimes. But yeah, that's about it. So now for work, I'm a freelance video producer. I work on all sorts of projects. In addition, I like create my own social content on Instagram and TikTok, which has been a blast, mostly talking about the climate crisis and sustainability and what we can do as like citizens as part of a system. Is it okay if I ask you about your stories first? Like how you got started and what you did?
Background. Yeah. We started a company called Last20, and essentially we're upcycling plastic waste into pavement. So we're kind of like in the very preliminary research and development stages, but essentially with plastic pavement, we're supplementing a portion of bitumen, which is the common binding agent in traditional pavement, with low density polyethylene, one of the plastics that is like super hard to recycle. So yeah, we're just kind of like, we actually just spoke to our engineer earlier today too. So we're hopefully going to do some pilot projects in the new year. And we're also from Canada. So
Yeah.
that's a little disclaimer there too.
Yeah, our business pivoted a little bit. Like we originally were doing like an apparel line. We still have like some shirts that are like made of recycled plastic bottles. And then we like saw a huge opportunity with this. And yeah, the idea is like, it actually is currently being done in India. So like that's originally where it started. And there's like, it's been going on there for like over a decade. Like obviously there are plastic problems like way worse than North America. So for them, like so many municipalities like mandate it that you have to use recycled plastic in your in their pavement jobs. So yeah, we're trying to like bring it into North America. And yeah, like Lauren said, we had our engineer today. Hopefully fingers crossed it goes well. And then yeah, we'll have some pilot projects for the new year. Yeah. So exciting.
Wow, I'm so impressed. This is so rad. Heck yeah, you too. Wow. I was not doing what you were doing when I was or what you're doing. So that's so awesome. Hats off to you. That's amazing. Where'd the idea come? Well, surely you have interest, I'm sure, and we'll chat about this too. You have interest and passions in sustainability or upcycling or closing the loop in the systems. But what made you think of it? Or had you visited India and seen it? Like, what was the cause?
It's kind of crazy because in our business program, they put us pretty much in these groups in first year, and you have to come up with like a business idea. And a lot of people are like, how are we addressing customer needs? But I kind of took a step back and I was like, we have like actual world problems that need solving. So why don't we focus our business model around that? Because it'll be easier to come up with a solution in that sense. And then just kind of as we were doing more research, we're like, oh my gosh, this is a very big problem. And then we started seeing it more so like in our hometown, just like trash piling along the side of the road as we would be like driving. And so we just kept doing research. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Enactus, but pretty much it's a global organization where university students from around the world create social enterprises. So
Cool.
we have a chapter at our university. We actually won runner-up at Worlds this year in September. So that was like a pretty big accomplishment.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, yeah. So like kind of going back to like the inception of the idea too. So we were like researching like both of our parents and like even my current job that I'm with right now, like we're really heavily involved like the construction sector. So we thought like, is there any way to incorporate like some type of waste, whether it's plastic or not, into like a building material? And so we were looking up like potential ideas and like trying to figure out like what made sense. And we kind of like stumbled into this other woman too, we're eventually going to have her on the podcast, and she introduced us to like a lot of information about low density polyethylene. And she's like, this is literally going directly to landfill. Like no one is using this because like in contrast to virgin plastics for like making plastic bags and stuff, it's literally cheaper and you get like a perfect clean product. So she's like, unless you have some use for this, no, it's pretty much going to landfill. So she's like, if you could find a use for this, and that's when we kind of like, you know, what can this be used for? Found out in India that like some people were trying to use this and other types of plastic in India too. And then we stumbled into like, there was actually one pilot project done in Nova Scotia, so like way far away from Ontario, but still in Canada. And then we got in contact with the engineer from there. He went to UW, he's a professor there. So we like, oh my God, perfect. Like it stars kind of like aligned, and we're like, hey, like we're going to work together. And
Cool.
yeah, so
whole entrepreneurial journey to get to.
Amazing. So cool. Well, it's cool that you not took advantage, but it's cool that you like recognize the communities you were already a part of, like from your family's profession, your parents' profession, to like the work you're in now. And you're like, okay, instead of like having to recreate the wheel and like research something from scratch, you're able to like take a lot of your probably like foundational, pun intended, knowledge on like construction and like you said, Lauren, like solve a world problem, not just meeting a customer's need, but addressing a world's problem.
oh, yeah,
So awesome.
Yeah, no, it's really cool too. And like, that's the whole thing. Like we both took like so many entrepreneurship courses, like when I was in school, and then Lauren still while she is too. And like, that's a huge thing too, just leveraging what you already know and you're an expert at. And so like, that was a huge thing for us. And even like at my current job, like we do a lot of insurance for like a lot of the biggest pavers in Canada. So I'm like, even as things start scaling, like we'll have good connections to reach out to like really blow it up. So yeah, we'll see where things go. I know.
Nice. Well, I mean, I feel like, well, I should say, I feel like I'm just always learning about environmentalism and sustainability and sustainable development, all the things. And I don't think anyone could truly be a master at it because there's so much new like science and data and innovation happening every day. But when I watched the TED Countdown conference, it was like, yeah, there was a TED talk on cement and how like detrimental cement is towards climate change. I had no idea. And I was like, man, maybe I'm playing such a small game in my own like research, but I had no idea how polluting and like how detrimental cement is as far as like carbon emissions go.
And it's such a profitable industry too. So if you can kind of find an innovative way to develop the technology, like it's a very blue ocean space in terms of like not only business opportunities, but like solving world problem opportunities.
Yeah. Which all of this makes me think, and as you were sharing, because I graduated in 2014, so I've been out of school for 6 years, but it makes me think of like just with the access of the internet, of course, you're going to see college students who aren't just trying to like create a business for business and like for the economy, but because we're aware of the world's problems. Whereas maybe like obviously our parents' generation didn't have that access when they were in school, or like any generation pre-internet didn't have that access to like think about what was going on in India, you know?
Yeah.
But now I think, I mean, people say like, oh, 70% of Gen Z or whatever, 80% of Gen Z cares about having like social responsibility or like taking that responsibility as a citizen, especially in like a wealthy country, to be like, wait, we're like the biggest polluters and we have to help clean up this mess we've made. But it also comes with just like the access of that awareness, you know, which is maybe why you see it in a younger generation of like older generations didn't know the impact when they were our age, you know?
Exactly. And even like going to like back to what Lauren was saying, like, so when I was in 2014 is when I was in first year. So I was doing the same thing where we had to like create a startup and everything like that too. And so like now even her program, like they're not mandating, but like really pushing the student class to focus on a profit for purpose is like how they coined the phrase. But whereas like when I literally 4 years ago, when I was in the same program, like that was not the intention. It was like, so you're seeing how things are changing.
Yeah. It'll be, I mean, I have to be careful how I say this because I said this a lot during the election, but I was like, man, the next generation gives me so much hope because I see like how widespread the like desire to make an impact or like to help others is, not even just like change the world, but to like help others or to like solve world problems. Be like, why do we have like a hunger problem in the world when we create so much food on this planet? Like, how could we have a hunger problem? Anyways, I don't want to put the responsibility on the younger generation because I feel like that's what older generations do to us. Like, it'll be your problem. Like, I'll die before climate change gets really bad. It's your problem. And we're like, wait, you got us here. Like, hello. But I am very inspired and very like excited about the younger generation, like growing into leadership positions or like hopefully running for like decision-making, political decision, positions. Because it'd be really cool to see with that type of awareness and desire what that could look like on a systemic level is pretty cool.
Honestly, like so much I want to kind of back up into literally going right back to the beginning when you're talking about the compost. I think that like says a lot about like the culture too. Obviously, like we're Canadian, not to say like Canada, US, like just I want to get
it's fine. Totally fine.
No, but like I'm curious to hear like your feedback too, because like in all honesty, we have like I think most of my friends all had like compost when like we were growing up. Like it was like really, really common. Maybe it's just like my municipality too. Like not everywhere in Canada is like this. But I'm just curious about like what was the culture like growing up? You're also like older than us too, so like even generationally speaking too, like my sister and younger generations are obviously a lot more like environmentally conscious. Like what was that like in school? Like was like environmentalism and climate change like at kind of the forefront at all, like in your education from what you remember, or like your friend group and stuff?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, well, it's crazy because I grew up in LA too, in like a beach city of LA, which you would think would be like extremely progressive. Like everyone would have a compost pile. And I think now maybe it's becoming like more accepted, but it's still not regulated. It's not like regulated, incentivized, or like rewarded on a county level.
Wow.
So you might see like a few institutions or a few like venues or like restaurants that will like offer it, or like a few like restaurants or like to go places that will offer compostable packaging or like be very clear about what to do with the food waste, but it is not like a widespread practice across.
Like you guys don't have like a curbside pickup or anything like that. Like you guys are like literally like, okay.
Well, what we have, which they're not like educating, what we have is they call it like a green bin. So you get 3 bins when you live in a home, or like in an apartment, you'll have like really in an apartment, you'll have 2 maybe. But in a home, you'll have 3 bins. So gray is waste, blue is recycle, and green is like yard waste. So if you're having like your landscaper come or whatever, you're doing gardening and you have like tree clippings or like grass clippings or leaves or something, you want to dispose of the green waste. But you would think like compost should just go in there. It's all going in the same place. They can either like mulch it or compost it. But it's not no. In California, there's two things I think. California, the only county I know that's doing this at like a systemic county level is San Francisco. I saw it in like a documentary the other day. I think it's called Need to Grow. I don't know if you've seen it, or Kiss the Ground. One of the two. They talked about San Francisco doing like countywide composting curbside pickup. But granted, San Francisco is only like 7 miles by 7 miles, which is crazy. And Vermont just made it illegal to throw away food scraps. But wow. Vermont's also like, I don't even know if it's like 1 million or 2 million. It's like a tiny little state, right? Yeah. So yeah, but it's not adopted nationally or like restricted or incentivized federally by any means.
I think it's like also improving in the sense too, like we just started using like compostable bags. Like a lot of these companies didn't even have the technology in terms of like breaking down the food in a proper sense. I actually just did a project with Ziploc and they just came out with compostable Ziploc bags, but you can't just throw those into your backyard either. It has to be commercial composting. And I think the problem with a lot of these organizations are not necessarily educating customers in terms of like how to properly dispose of certain bags, and then especially when it's implemented within your community, it's like that much.
So like step number one is like kind of just getting the system put in place, but then if the consumers aren't actually using it properly, like it's not really an efficient system. That's kind of the next challenge.
Totally. Which I think, granted, because in the States we're talking about like 330 million people, which is insane because it's like
10 times us.
How do you educate that many people? Obviously you can focus on the curriculums in schools as like the generations get older, because like that's where you can create these habits, or even just the awareness, like what we were talking about earlier. But I have this analogy and I feel like now's an appropriate time to share. And this is like terrible. It's going to sound terrible when I say it, but like, let me explain. So I feel like, unfortunately, Americans, the majority of us are just kind of like cattle. We're like mooing. We're like moo, and we like moo, and we just kind of like herd together, and we're being like told where to go. We're just like cattle. And the things that these cattle prioritize are like convenience and price, because that's what we've been told. And of course, like a capitalistic economy wants us to believe that is like, you don't have enough time, you don't have enough money. We're actually living in this scarcity mindset that like that takes too long or that's too expensive, therefore I can't do it. And unfortunately, like the sustainable movement has this idea that like it's so inconvenient because you have to go so far, or like you have to go to such great lengths to get it done, or like it takes too long. You're like, I don't have time to go take my compost to a compost drop off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, you have these cattle who are like mooing, and those are the things they care about. We're like convenience and price, moo. And then you have the people on like the end of the spectrum who are kind of like, I imagine like the gauchos or the coyote or the cowboys who are like, woo. And you have us on the other end of the spectrum. And like myself, maybe like, I mean, we call it like left, whatever, liberal or conservative, or not even. It could just be like, as far as the environmental, like
just care about the environment.
Environmental spectrum, not even making it political, because climate change should not be controversial. Come on. So on the spectrum, you might have folks like me and us probably who are like, we have to do something. Like it can still be convenient and it can still be cost effective, and we can still implement this at scale. It might like shock you for a second, but like we can create lasting change. Like, come on. And then you have other people on the other side who are like a lot of like lobbyists, I guess, and who are like funding the fossil fuel companies, or who are getting paid by the fossil fuel companies, who are like, you can't change America's dependency on oil, and like plastic, and especially now with COVID, like plastic keeps things safe, and it keeps things sanitary, and it keeps things convenient and inexpensive, and all these things. So I hear you with like, how do you, it has to be from the business offering something to the customer. But I feel like, unfortunately, since we are like cattle, it has to be something that's like so seamless. Because I think the majority of folks, unfortunately, if they're already buying bottled water, yes, we can do like our hardest and our best to educate folks on like, stop buying bottled water. Mm-hmm. And we can just like change what the plastic and bottled water is made out of. And then people will keep buying, and it's like seamless. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So God forbid that bottle ends up in the ocean. Like the customer didn't even change a habit. But like if that bottle of water plastic bottle of water ended up in the ocean, it would just like marine degrade naturally because it was made from a marine degradable product. So like I think there should be focus on that too, because unfortunately I don't think when you're talking about 330 million Americans at large, like not to say like the younger generations or like the pioneers who are really trying to like educate folks on the masses, it has to just like change the material. Like you guys with this, it's like people might walk on your sidewalk or on the pavement and not even know what it was made out of, like not notice a difference. And maybe they don't have to, but like they are not affected by it. Do you know what I mean? Actually, only to their benefit is like now they're probably inhaling less chemicals from like the toxic materials used before, and there's like less trash in their community and in their country. So yeah, I think I think education and like systemic changes and like business regulation are all pieces of the puzzle.
100%.
Yeah. And I think what you said too, like going back to like when you mentioned it being like a really capitalistic environment too, and that's why I think getting entrepreneurs more involved, where you understand that, look, if you could really find a solution that is seamless, we call it like a triple bottom line, like it's profitable, it's good quality, and it's also good for the environment. Like you can't really miss. So just try to create solutions like that, and it will work and it will lead to like long-term change. But obviously easier said than done. Like you have to go through the efforts to do it and make it happen. But
I think another thing too, even to just go back, because you were talking about the NGO that you were participating with, I feel like those are also a good way to kind of educate people. And I guess maybe if you want to kind of share your experience with the NGO that you worked with.
Yeah. Before I get into the Surfrider Foundation, I think a common misconception when you talk about like the triple bottom line is like you have to have the money first before you implement sustainable practices or like sustainable development. And I get into like a few heated conversations with friends about this because I'm like, if it's not from the beginning, it is so much harder, as we're learning with the climate crisis. It is so much harder to like retract and start implementing solutions once you've already done the damage than just like start with it. So people are like, but first they have to start making money and then they can like offer compostable options, or like, and then they can start, I don't know, doing 1%, donating 1% for the planet or something like that. And I'm like, but if you don't start with it, I think like the intention is missed from the beginning. And I think a perfect example of that is, have you guys heard of Interface Carpets with Ray Anderson?
No.
We did a case. I'll send you a link after. We did a case study on him. He's so endearing. I think he passed a few years ago, but he started a carpet company and he like completely like revolutionized the circular economy or like closed loop system. And you're like, it's a flooring company. It's not like a trendy water bottle company. It's not like an electric car company. It's not like something that would seem obvious to be a sustainable company. And yet he made it like fully closed loop and was like carbon negative, like was producing energy for the community. That's how like negative off the grid. It was amazing. There's a carpet company and was like cleaner water going out than was going into his factory. Anyways, I'll send you his TED Talk. It's remarkable. Okay, yes, Lauren. The environmental NGO I joined is called the Surfrider Foundation, and obviously it's their chapters are mostly in coastal communities because it's an ocean conservation nonprofit or environmental NGO. So the like entry level activity is doing a beach cleanup, and it's how we probably engage with the most volunteers, with the most outreach, because I think once you see firsthand when you're picking up stuff from the beach, you're like, wait, I use these like toothpick cleaners, or like I smoke cigarettes, or I use like how many chip bags did I buy this year? And you start seeing the products that are like in your house or in your car, your backpack, and you're like, wait, this very well could have come from me, from whoever ended up here, either like by littering or by mistake. And so it's definitely like the most entry level way that we can engage with the community, and it's all data. So every like pound and piece of trash is counted, collected, and weighed, and then that's used at the local level to pass different ordinances. So like the one I was a part of that was amazing, that definitely like hooked me in, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm like in this thing, was in Santa Monica. I was living in LA. We collected enough data and worked with the county, either Santa Monica Office of Sustainability or LA County Office of Sustainability. But anyways, collected enough data and worked with them and actually like passed or presented, and it was passed, a single-use plastic ordinance. So the city of Santa Monica, like no food outlet could offer single-use plastic. And I think they were like a little gracious on like cold lids. There was like 2 or 3 things that they were like, we still need to innovate what the alternative would be. But sure enough, you started seeing like all paper bags or like paper wraps on like a wrap instead of like saran wrap, or like the compostable clamshells, paper cups, like the little like salad dressing things, like all the like paper, everything. A few of the like commercially compostable plastics that like get like the bioplastics that get a little tricky, because if it goes in the ocean, it's not going to break down. But it was like a very robust plan, and it was within the year they had to eliminate all single-use plastics. This is before COVID, so this was 2018. It was passed in 2019. It was mandated, but I think with COVID, there's been like so many
drawbacks.
Or like the restrictions have been alleviated because these companies were like, we can't do it. Like we can't keep up with the to-go if we can't offer dine-in services, because one of the main pushes was to ask the customers for here to go, to like incentivize plates instead of like plastic, people having like a plastic clamshell only to eat it on site. Anyways, but that was my like engagement, I guess, in the Surfrider Foundation. And then through there again, like created an amazing community and met a few folks who were taking the UCLA certificate course for sustainability. And I was like, what's that? And ended up taking it and like finishing all the courses and loving it. But yeah, I think I watched a doc actually in one of the UCLA classes. I watched a doc called The No Impact Man. It's on YouTube. It's awesome. It's this man in New York who tried to live with like 0 impact for 1 year. And he documented the whole thing with his wife and his like 3-year-old kid. And at the end, he said, people always ask me, what's my one tip I would give them to live more sustainably? Is it like cutting on your showers or like biking to work, or what is it? And he goes, honestly, it's join an NGO, like join an environmental community or environmental group in your community, because they have all the data, they have all the resources. They're probably talking to like your state reps and senators, and who are the ones who are like going to implement change, who are like trying to get in the ears of the decision makers to make these like we said, like systemic changes. So yeah, that's been like a huge part of my sustainability journey so far.
To segue a little bit there, when you were talking about UCLA, like what was like that experience like in terms of the courses that you took? Like, did you notice that was a lot of it like kind of driven from the NGO, or did you kind of have interest into doing this, or like what was like that whole experience like?
And maybe just to add like any resources that you think you would suggest that you've taken from those specific courses that you would share that might be free, or I guess.
You already told us a bunch of videos. We'll definitely add all those, but like even if you have like books or like speakers that you really enjoyed too, like those are awesome.
Yeah. Okay. What drew me to it? I was actually talking to my sister about this today. I think we're like in curriculum, and maybe Luke, maybe you feel, or Lucas, you feel like this too, being out of school for a few years, but like for 22 years of your life, or like minus pre-kindergarten, for like 20 years, whatever, 18 years of your life, you are like in a curriculum and you are on a path, and you know, like I'm graduating this year, I am like in these courses, I'm taking this prerequisite, you're like on this curriculum journey. So here I am, like 6 years out of school. Granted, it was like 4 years out of school. And I was like really craving curriculum, because you're like, I'm not being assigned certain readings. I'm not really learning about things I don't care about, which actually has like huge impacts too. Like people be like, I took this psychology class, I don't know why I have to be in this class, but it's like a prereq, or it's a like GE I have to take. And it end up being like some of the raddest classes you take, or like the classes that are outside of your major, at least for me anyways. But I think I was craving that like, not necessarily accountability, but just that like structure of being like in a classroom setting and having assignments. And maybe for me, I will say for me, I like perform best, or I do best when I have assignments, or like I'm like maybe not as disciplined to just be like, okay, I guess I'll read this book, or like something. But if someone's like, you have to do this reading and then you're gonna do a project and you're gonna present it from the class, I'm like, wow, that accountability actually like helps me a lot with the discipline. And I think I had a lot of like passion and interest, because granted, this is only like 4 years ago. We're talking about, I like was like, what is all of this? And I have to do something. But I was very passionate and very interested, but not necessarily like educated. That was like the interest in there. And UCLA, like hooks you in quickly because your 101 class, like your intro into the certificate, is taught by the chief sustainability officer of the school. So, and she is amazing. Her name's Nurit Katz. And she is like so inviting and so welcoming because you have people from like all backgrounds, all ages, all like professions and like interest levels and everything in these courses. And she is so just like inviting and welcoming, and she understands like this has to be across all fields and departments and like walks of life for this to be like implemented at scale, or for like people to innovate new solutions. It has to be like not just one type of folk, but like a bunch of people. So it's brilliant. And the curriculum was set up, and every week was like so it's 12 weeks, I guess. And every week was like a different topic within sustainability. So like you talk about energy one week, you talk about food another week, you talk about business, you talk like every week was different. So you get a lot of like breadth. And then the following courses you got to choose. I think there were 3 prereqs, and then the other courses you got to choose. So the 2 I focused on were social entrepreneurship, actually, and then climate change and energy. And then the second prereq is like sustainable business, and the third is like sustainable communities, because like people, planet, profit. So they teach you the planet essentially in the 101 class, and then the people with social and communities, and then the economy and business for the last one. I have a blog post where I have a list of like books and podcasts and films. Being like a video person or like a person who communicates best, the documentaries is definitely like the longest list. I think that would be like the ultimate goal for myself, is either to like create my own or work on an environmental documentary. Because when I think of like the type of content that has shaped me in this journey the most, it's been documentaries. Because I think like we have so many questions, and you can read from different experts and things like that. But once we like hear these experts on camera speaking about something they're so passionate about, or like this state of the planet, or like this, they're scientists sharing their findings. I think that's probably like the most inspiring type of content that I interact with. But let me think about what I would recommend.
Another thing too is like the visual aspect. I find when people see like solutions or see these different types of things, and I guess that can kind of almost turn into like your TikTok content as well.
My first reaction when you're sharing all of this, Lauren, is what I have learned is like numbers numb people, and how people will actually be like connected to a movement is through experience. So and I think that's what documentaries do such a good job at, because a lot of the information they share with you like is statistical. They'll tell you like this is how much plastic is in the ocean, or like this is what the status of the coral reefs are, or like this is how much left of like the polar ice caps, or like this is the melting of the polar ice caps. Or they'll tell you the information, but when you see it, you're like, wait, what? Like when you see the deforestation in South America, and or like other parts of the world, and you're seeing like populations of orangutan being like completely eliminated, and you see that, like, I don't know if you guys have watched the David Attenborough A Life on Our Planet film.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, it's so good. You know David Attenborough, the like old man who narrates all the films. No. I'm
gonna have to dig into your blog post and start getting.
It's okay. So David Attenborough is like, he's like the old English man who narrates all the films. You know what I mean? He's like, when people are like, hey, we have a orangutan in his natural habitat.
Yeah.
That's David Attenborough. And he's this 92-year-old amazing environmentalist, and had like I think he had like a few TV shows at one point where he was traveling the world and just like it was like the first of its kind, just showing like wild nature to an audience on television. Anyways, some of the images shown in that film, you're like, oh, like it's not a statistic that you're hearing that will like hit you in the gut, like when you see the status of the planet and like of like nature systems and what we have done to it to like put beef on the table, you know. So I guess what I try to do with my content is like bring people into some sort of experience. And I guess what I always try to do is like invite people into the space and like be very clear that like there is no such thing as perfection, and we have to just like be extremely welcoming and inviting into this, because I do think sustainability can like we said earlier about convenience and price, it can feel very like exclusive, or people are like, there's no way, that's not realistic. Especially when you start talking to like moms and families. They're like, I have kids. How am I supposed to do like sustainable diapers or whatever? So I try to be really inclusive about the movement, or just about like living a sustainable lifestyle. And I feel like I'm always being like course corrected and nudged and just like encouraged, and not like in a mean way, but I think the TikTok community will make it very clear when you've said something that they're not happy with. But I like take it all as constructive criticism, and I need to be like more inclusive, even more inclusive in my like language, if this is something that I want to be like a trusted educator at, you know. But yeah, TikTok has been fun. I was in Argentina. The like highlight reel, I guess, was I was in Argentina in February. I quit my job. I was working like in-house at like a massive CPG company, creating like short form and social content for them, and was like really unhappy. And I shouldn't say that. I was like very grateful, and it was an amazing time. But as I was getting like really invested in sustainability, I was like, this is not a sustainable business. I have to get out of here. So I left, and then I quit February 15th. And then I left for Argentina February 26th. And this is like right before COVID. So I was in Argentina for like 4 weeks before it was like, I have to come home. And I planned to be there for like 4 months to like travel in between going freelance and all these things. So I was literally like in quarantine by myself in this Airbnb in Argentina. And I downloaded TikTok, and I'm 28, which is like kind of old. Like I'm not Gen Z. And I was like, what is this? And I was like learning this savage dance alone by myself in this Airbnb. I was like, who am I? How old am I? Oh my God. But I saw like a huge need and a huge opportunity to talk about sustainability, because like no one was talking about it on TikTok. And I was like, I feel like I could do this. So I just started like reviewing sustainable products I already had in my house. I was like, oh, this is like this is what a safety razor is, and this is how you use it, and this is why it's like a plastic-free alternative. Or like, these are toothpaste tablets, and this is like an alternative you can use instead of plastic toothpaste. And granted, I think I got in on I started being like a creator on TikTok when there like weren't very many creators, but like a lot of users. And then now, like, since COVID has only made people say, or like quarantine dragged on way longer than we thought, I think more and more people started downloading TikTok. And now you see people from like all ages who are creators. But anyways, I think I got in at like a unique time when it was very easy to gain a following very, very fast. So before I knew it, I had like all these people who were like, we want sustainability content. And I was like, heck yeah. So it's been fun. It's been really fun. And now I get to work with sustainable brands and talk about their products. And I feel like I only vet the ones that I actually see like viable, or who are actually doing like amazing things to either like try to compete in this like tough market, or who have like an amazing mission. But it's really cool. Like you two, like it's really cool to see people who are innovating sustainable solutions to problems like plastic pollution, or like fast fashion, or like
all the different facets of climate change.
Yeah, but how do you I don't know how, if it's crazy, because I feel like a lot of people have a lot to say about like about capitalism. And like the one comment I get all the time on my content is, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. And I hear those folks loud and clear. But I also think like as we evolve the system and understand like we have that a country's well-being shouldn't be like quantified by our GDP, but rather like the health and wellness of our people. As we like start to finally talk about that, even like bring awareness to that. And I don't know how that shows up in Canada so much as in the States. But obviously we have like issues as far as like healthcare and college education and things that are like so expensive or like extremely privatized here in the States, which creates like huge disparities. From like why, anyways, we could go down a rabbit hole forever. But I think sustainable business is awesome. And there's a lot of companies who are trying to do really good things. And when you think of like how many there are who are doing everything with like an ethical and environmentally conscious supply chain, down to like their distribution, down to like their packaging for like e-commerce, like how does it show up on your front door? It's amazing. And we have to acknowledge those organizations for what they're doing. And I think like as a creator, in full transparency, that's like how I make part of my income, is like working with brands to essentially create like advertisements for their products. But I commit to doing it in like a very like transparent and open way, you know, and like vetting these organizations from the beginning. Is this even one that I would want to work with, you know?
Yeah, no, it's definitely like TikTok is a beast. Like there's so many different things that you're gonna get and like feedback, and like I totally hear what you're saying too. Like we get comments like that too, where they, you know, it's not just like totally bash capitalism, but it's like, let's redefine what capitalism is, and if it can incorporate a lot of these values at like the forefront, like you said, like not just having GDP as like the main indicator, it can really be a powerful thing, and it shouldn't just be, you know, always put capitalism in the corner and always look at it down that lens, looking at it in a different perspective. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess kind of to start like wrapping things up here, I don't know if you want to share maybe like either your like favorite sustainability story or like a stat, like something that you think would resonate with the listeners and kind of our followers and your followers. That's like a one key takeaway.
I'm trying to like follow my intuition more recently. So it's like when that first thought comes, it's like, follow that. There's probably something there, you know? I think, and I was talking to a girlfriend about this yesterday. I think the rhetoric around around environmentalism is, there's like a widespread like awakening that's coming across the space that I think is like finally translating to the public, is like we are not disconnected from nature. And I'm like very inspired by that recently, and I'm like hoping that I can convey that to like my audience and my community, my family and friends and everything. And my mom actually told me this, so I'm like learning from her amidst all of this too. But we are not disconnected. Like we have only disconnected ourselves and have like siloed ourselves and put ourselves like in walls in front of screens. And like we are the ones that are disconnecting from like nature systems that happened naturally long before us and like will continue long after us. And I think the way we speak about nature has been, at least in the States, has been, I'm going to the beach, I'm like going to the mountains, I'm going to spend a weekend in nature, as if it's a place to visit and not something that like we are a part of. So there's this beautiful TED Talk, and I'll send it to you too, where she just, the scientist, or I'm not sure what her background is, but she says like it is everywhere, nature is everywhere. And the more that we can encourage and educate folks that like nature is like, when you inhale, like that is nature. When you look outside and see if it's like sunlight or moonlight, like that is nature. When you step out your front door and you see either like a weed growing through the sidewalk or like a tree or a bumblebee or something, like all of that is nature. And it's not I have to go to the mountains. And I think now, especially with COVID, you have people who are like, I just need to go to nature. I just need to go to the nature. I just need to go to the mountains. I just need to go to the beach for a weekend, or like to recharge or to something like that. But it's like, oh no, we are a part of it all the time. Like when you eat produce, it's like that is literally a product of photosynthesis. Like we are all connected and dependent on each other. And the more we can reconnect with that system and remember the truth in that, it's like, then you and I aren't disconnected, you know, then climate change isn't like a Paris Accord argument. It's like, no, these are our, like, this is us. Like climate change doesn't know a border of a country or like a color of skin, like doesn't know any of that. And yet somehow that's how it's become controversial, is like, who is going to pay for it? But we are all, it is all connected. And the more we can return to that, I think the better we will solve this problem.
Beautiful.
That was so, I like got shivers. Like that was so, no, because it's so easy to get roped into like whatever your job is and like really miss these things just because you're so focused in terms of making money and like having that as your mindset. But I think if people make goals to like allocate more time to being outside, spending time with nature, being with, you know, other people and stuff, I think that'll be definitely like something to include down the road.
Yeah. So good.
Well, thanks again for like doing this with us.
Thank
you.
Really
appreciate it. And like
I love like all your perspectives on like everything. It was so interesting to hear like what you had to say.
Well, right back at you too. I'm so impressed and like so cheering you on. I think what you're doing, what you're creating is awesome. And the fact that you're like 22, 24, like that is insane that you're doing what you're doing. And I shouldn't even like put age as a category, because here I am being like the older generation who's here. Like, disconnecting us. But I think it's so awesome what you two are up to, and I'm like totally cheering you on, and I can't wait to like see what this looks like when it's like executed at scale in the States. Like I'm so on team
We'll
Last
definitely
20.
tap into your markets, let you know when we're
Yeah.
heading to LA.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. If you would like to learn more, visit us at www.last20.ca. Until next time, stay sustainable.